Welcome to One Foot in Both Worlds, keeping it real with Tania and Nette. Hello, everyone. We have been away for 2 months. So for those that are listening regularly, Tania and I have met every week for maybe 10 months or something like that. And due to both having personal stuff on, we've had a break. So I've moved house. And hello, Tania, I missed you.
I've missed you too. I miss doing this. I miss connecting with spirit this way. I miss connecting with you. It's definitely been a gap in my life for sure. So update us. What's been going on?
Well, after I think maybe 17 years or 16 years, we sold our house and moved. So we've moved to our new place in the same town, but moving. But it's so hard to move. Like there's so much to do in that time. So that took about 3 weeks for me of just solid moving, and then another couple of weeks of moving into here. We've taken some ski trips. My son's down in Canberra, so we've gone and spent a week meeting all his friends. Which is pretty awesome. I had a friend who was battling 3.5 years of cancer, and he got very sick and passed away during that time too. So I was able to spend a lot of time with him, which I really loved. And I've been working with a whole bunch of new people too that just keep kind of knocking on my door and becoming part of my life. So a lot medically kind of, but it all relates back to energy really. So I've been doing lots of energy works. I haven't done my energy circles for ages, but we're about to start them all up again. So I'm super excited, but I too miss, when we get together, spirit comes in such a different way. And it's interesting. I may glitch a bit in this, but today it's already started to be glitchy on my end. So I think that energy's high, and we mess with computers when our energy's high. What about you? What have you been doing?
Well, I think just when we did the last one before the break, I changed jobs and I have a permanent position there now, which is good. And about a week after my dad passed away, as you know, and when I was actually back home with my family during that, I received a bunch of I was basically told that that's what we're going to be talking about next is going to be death, grief, what it's like, what we are sort of shown for what it's like before, during, and after. And then there's three more after that, which we'll kind of figure out as we go. Um, what else? I've had a really interesting, uh, almost transformative period where it's really hard for me to even put into words because it's just been a change. I'm calmer, I'm more relaxed. I don't have as much stress on my plate, and it's just a kind of an adjustment. So yeah, it's I guess you could call it sort of like a level up. Most mediums are going to know exactly what I'm talking about because they're very pronounced times in your journey where you just kind of um level up. You just change, and it comes with a weird feeling of like being discombobulated, where you just kind of feel um in touch but operating differently. Oh my God. And just when I said operating differently, remember that reading
No, no, no. Remind me. There's been too
from
many.
from the podcast where it was like 1 month, 3 months,
Oh,
rest,
yes.
relax, cocoon? Because when you like have everything that you need, because when you come out the other side of it, you're going to be operating in the world in a completely different way.
Yeah, here you are.
And and yeah, it's interesting because I was kind of like intuiting in my head that I can't remember exactly what it was. I want to say it was 1 month, 3 months. And I was kind of thinking that like after 3 months it was done, but it hasn't really been the case. I've been cocooning for a number of
Yeah.
of months. Yeah, and I'm not sure I'm quite done cocooning yet, but yeah, super interesting.
Yeah, I definitely felt a different energy, a very much calmer energy with you, which was great. And
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that we spoke very briefly just before we started this recording, but I think the analogy of a child that sort of eats and then gets fatter and then sort of goes up again is very much what it's like. So that when we're that, plump little kid full of all the intuition and all that sort of stuff, we then get bigger. So our space gets bigger, like we've leveled up to a new level. So we don't feel full anymore. So we're kind of like, oh, wow, is my intuition still at the same level that it is? And it is. In fact, it's just created more room for more. And so, that's a hard feeling for us because we're so used to having it just so at tap, and then it's
Yes,
still
yes.
at tap, but it's at tap with more space. So it's like, oh, okay, I can look over there now and there's nothing there and what's there. And all that space is going to fill over the next 5 years or 10 years or however long. And I think for you, that's a really exciting place to be in. Like you were already so intuitive and now it's like, next level, what's this going to bring?
To think that there's a next level is crazy,
Yeah.
right? Like that there's going to be a next level of information, understanding, and ability is pretty fascinating.
But I think we've done that all our lives, like, haven't we? Like
Yes.
we
Yep.
just keep growing. But this one for you was just such a big one, I think. So it's so noticeable. And maybe
Yeah.
because we're podcasting and doing this stuff that we reflect on it more. Yeah, but I'm excited to see what differences. I can feel energetically the difference. So I'm excited for you, I think.
Yeah, I
Yes.
can too, but it's also just strange because,
Yeah.
like I was talking about it a bit in our last series where I was like, I'm usually so action oriented, and I'm not, and I'm not, and I'm really happy just sitting back and letting life come to me.
Yeah.
And when it comes to trying to sort of like exert, push myself forward into something, I'm like, meh.
Yeah.
Like I just don't have the desire. I'm just happy to, eat some good food, curl up, watch the stars, go for a swim. Like it's really, really, really different. And
Yeah.
it's interesting that you said water because I've been really drawn to the ocean. Like we're in summer and I have been itching. I prefer actually to go to the ocean with other people, but maybe I need to start going myself and just go swimming or be in the water and to kind of open that up a little bit more.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I just said that then or whether just before we started. So I was saying that I can see that water is going to be a real conduit for you. I can feel that
Yeah.
around you so much, which it always was, right? But I think it's
Yes.
just going to be so much bigger, and it is for me too. Like I couldn't not live near the beach and the river anymore. Like I need it. It's like it
Yeah.
feeds me. Yeah.
No, people have asked me before if I'm going to move back to like back home. And over, I'm like, I don't think I could be away from the ocean. I just don't
Yeah.
think I could. It's just a part of me. And I would find it, and it's specifically the ocean. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's lakes and that, but like I specifically need the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something
Yeah.
about that whole connected body of water, I think, that is just
Hmm.
powerful. So, all
Yeah.
righty. So, should we get into today's topic? It's interesting that we're talking about death, and we're going to start with the before. So, we've got before death, when you actually die, and then after death. And this is for the person that's dying, we're talking about. So we also will do a series about the people around you when someone is dying, because I think they're very two different experiences, but also they're intercombined. So it's interesting, like where does this start? Where does the before start? I mean, we're born, that means we've got to die, right? So, you can go as far back to then. But I think we're talking about uh, the diagnosis, almost the bit where you feel that, okay, I've got to wait, or I'm in a car accident and I have no time before death. Like, what is that time before death, and what does that look like? Is that where you sort of sit?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about because I've certainly had experiences with people with dementia or Alzheimer's where their spirit will come through in reading, or people that are just ill and sort of laid out. There's every now and then their spirit will come through, but I definitely see it with dementia and Alzheimer's. One came through and was asking for peanuts, like it was kind of funny. and which I thought was absolutely fascinating. So that happened, but I know that with your friend, you had some interesting experiences. So why don't we start off with that?
Yeah. So I'm sure that my friend is quite happy for me to talk about it because he ended up being quite fascinated with what would happen, and his knowledge in what happened grew so much. He was diagnosed 3.5 years, roughly, I think, before he died of cancer. And in that time, he started to have a desire to understand what happens when I die. And so he did his own research, and he got better, went to remission and came out again. But eventually he got to the point where he knew that he had no longer. And I think it was a couple of weeks before he passed away. It's a bit of a blur to me, to be honest. Those days, they sort of merged together. But I had been meeting with him a couple of times and with his wife, and we'd been discussing how he was feeling and what I could see when you died, so that he could understand it. He gave me understandings. He'd listened to a lot of podcasts, talked to a lot of people. So he had his understanding of what would happen when die. And I had, yeah, so he was regularly kind of starting to leave his body. So I could see that. I could see him leaving his body and then coming back. And it was interesting. I would know almost when he was asleep and leaving his body, because he would come and visit me. So this is why he was still living, and I could really feel him around. It was quite beautiful, really, and really calm. But one night, I went to bed, and I'm going to make this shorter because it's quite a long story. But he came to me in his while I was sleeping, or I'd just woken up, but while he was sleeping, he'd left his body, and he had been invited to go. His soul had been invited to go outside of his body to get some information to help his physical body transition and be calmer. So I went with him to this circle, and he asked two questions, and the main one was about fear. And they sat and they gave us this whole dialogue about the point and the purpose of fear when we were alive, if that makes sense. So, and they started with fear is our friend. And I'll never forget that. It was like, I was like, I hate fear. Like, fear's all the bad stuff. And it was like, no, fear balances out what we do. It keeps us alive. So it's the reason when we go to a cliff that we don't go too far. It's the reason why we don't drive too fast in a car. It's the reason why we wear a helmet when we're snowboarding. You know, the fear of dying is huge. But as you start to die, they basically told him that you need fear no more, and that they were going to help him. And the process of what he was doing was to actually take that fear away, so that in his last weeks and last days, in particular his last days, he wasn't afraid to die. And if you're not afraid to die and you know where you're going and you've been there already, it means that the calmness and the crossover from and the disjointed from your physical can actually go. Because remember, it's only a tiny part of your soul that belongs in the body. The rest of it's already there. So what he was actually meeting with was the rest of his soul. Like, he was meeting with parts of where he was, to say, this is where you're going to go, this is what's happening, these are your fears as a human, and this is what we're doing. And why we sleep every night, remember from our earlier podcast on sleep, this is what happens when we sleep. But as you get closer to dying, you actually go in and out. So he was sleeping and waking and sleeping and waking. So he was returning and coming back to his body. And he asked me if I could write this down. Now, I was awake when I was receiving this information. It was at night, but I was still awake. So I literally pulled my phone out and I wrote down the information that he wanted me to tell him the next day, so that he would remember it. Because he said, I know I keep going and I keep coming back. And he told me this when he in his physical as well. But I only remember parts of it. And this one I really want to remember. I want to keep reminding my physical of why I don't need to be afraid. So I was super cool. I messaged him the next day and said this, and he said to me, I felt myself go somewhere, and this is all very familiar. So he was captivated by that kind of information. And so his before gave him time to, when he actually got to death, to be a beautiful and peaceful crossover. And then he could also come back very quickly as a spirit to his people, to his family, like he hadn't left that kind of mental part because only his physical had gone. Yeah, so it was pretty cool. It was pretty fascinating. I felt really honored to be my soul to be invited to be part of that discussion. I then had to recalibrate fear because I need fear because I'm still alive. Like, and I said to him, hang on a minute, I don't want this energy of fear to disappear. Fear's really important to keep me alive. So I had to kind of I was like, I love fear now. Fear's beautiful. It's not a negative. And I was like, oh
I'm
no,
not afraid of anything.
yeah, let's run off the cliff.
And then I could go back there.
Yeah. So I realized I do want to stay as a human, and fear is extremely important still in my life. To be something to be afraid of things was important. But for him at that time, it was no longer. And they showed me that this happens regularly for people, that they actually leave, and some only just before, some won't remember it at all. Some will have sort of this thing to say, I don't know why, I'm just not afraid anymore. And I know that he visited this circle many times because he said he'd been there before and he invited me to come there. So he'd obviously had other discussions. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
That's fascinating. There's one piece that I wanted you to expand on from your experience, and that was you said that only a part of his soul was in his body, and then he basically joined up with other parts of his soul. But that almost makes souls feel very individualistic. And that's
Yeah.
not how spirit shows it to me. It's like clouds with a raindrop but it's all from the same, it's like a drop from the ocean, but it's all the same ocean.
Yeah, I do see it that
Can
way, but I
you?
also see, yes. So if you imagine a big cloud, it still comes down and there's his section of which some of that goes into his body. So that's almost like his seventh. And there is one above
I
that I
understand.
see very clearly. Yeah. So it's
So
that
his
part of
section,
him.
it was connecting with other parts of his section within that drop down piece.
Yeah, and as I said to Matt, there was actually other pieces of that piece that were coming in to him, not just the bit that dropped out with him. So he was asking his actual almost human part of the soul was asking for his soul to have permission to hear this and understand this. So, that it was almost like his physical was getting a chance to go up there and listen. You know what I mean? And then go back down
Mm-hmm.
again. And that part of the soul that aligns with your physical was actually having that discussion. And I think we all are one, like everything, all energy is interconnected when it comes to it, but they still actually draw. It's like the drop that's coming down, but then only a part of that drop is actually in
Yes,
every day in our life. And
I
that's
would
why
agree
we
with
can,
that. I
yeah,
would agree with that completely.
that's why my soul could connect because it's interconnected. So I didn't like walk across to there.
Exactly.
I energetically went into mine, and then I would have been one of those energetic links coming across, sitting there listening to it. It was funny because we started with our legs crossed and sitting, and I was like, oh, this actually looks very physical. And then it just disappeared. As Matt got comfortable, all of that disappeared. Because often when I go and I get information with spirit, you don't see people and things. They don't visualize that for me unless I'm talking to someone else, and then they'll visualize something that makes
As a
sense to
person.
them. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't see that world as people in any way. And so
Yes.
they don't need to do that for me. But when we started with Matt, I was like, oh, this is unusual. I've been to these spaces before, but I've never seen us as people. But it was his soul presenting it to him as he was learning and growing
Yes.
within that. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I felt really, really honored. I think it is an honor thing to be invited to someone else's physical memory of their soul. Like, you're invited into their almost physical mind in many ways. So that was cool. But yeah, it was a new angle of fear for me. And I think to know that your loved ones get those messages before they die is beautiful. Like that calmness and stuff that our souls prepare our physical, because our physical feels pain and things like that. You don't want to see someone's physical go through that trauma. And it doesn't mean that everyone when they're dying is not going to do it, because their connection with their soul, if that's not aligned well, and they do try and prepare you to align well before you die, then, you know, you're not going to understand that you don't want to be afraid. You know what I mean? So there's still a lot of people, and even that little bit of fear at the end, you're still physical. Like, you know, I'm sure there was a bit where my friend went, "Oh, I don't want to die." You know, like, it's not saying, it's just that you're not grasping constantly of, "I don't want to die," you
Yeah,
know.
falling off the cliff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. I just think that's absolutely fascinating. And so for me, my one thing that Spirit said at the very beginning of this, and they said it before, is there's no wrong way to die. And they wanted that message to be very clear. There is no wrong way to die. I certainly have people come for readings where they've had somebody who has passed as a result of taking their own life or different things, and they say there is no wrong way to die. You don't go to a different place because of the way in which you died. So my
Absolutely.
father had some health issues, and he had chosen a medically assisted death. So when I found out, I had like 5 days basically to spend with him. So I went home, and he had decided on his date. And when I got there, it was really sad to see my dad. And my dad's a very strong man. So to see him in that very weakened state of like feeling absolutely horrible, you know. And he said to me, at one point, he said, you know, he goes, I almost feel like a coward for, you know, for kind of taking this way out. And I said, Dad, we don't get extra points for suffering. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you don't get extra points by having this egregiously painful death. Like,
Yeah.
and they just, Spirit kept saying there's no wrong way to die. So I had a bit of a similar. Now my dad was not a spiritual man, and I think that's a big difference with your friend.
Yeah.
Is he was fairly spiritual, mine was not. I would say mine was like way far over on the spectrum to the extremely logical side. And which was a little almost disappointing for me, because it was like, you know, I could have this beautiful sort of spiritual experience with you and explain these things to you, but there just really wasn't a time for that. One time that he did, because he was sleeping a lot, obviously he laid down, and I could his spirit kind of came into the living room, and I was like, oh, there you are. But I didn't communicate or anything, because I didn't want it to be almost alarming or scary for him when he went back to his physical, because I know that he's not, doesn't believe in sort of mediumship and that stuff. But we did have one conversation where I said, are you scared, or like, how are you feeling about this? He goes, yeah, I'm just kind of wondering, like, what's it going to be like? Am I going to have consciousness when I cross over? Like when I die, am I going to know anything? Or is it just like, it goes into like a black pit of doom? And, and I said, well, I can kind of explain it to you. And he kind of, my dad has this way of looking at you where he's like, almost looking at me like, okay. So I just explained, you know, basically you cross over, your family members are going to be there, and it's going to be, I'm like, Dad, it's going to be really easy. Like you just leave and you move into a different reality, and it's not scary, and you have nothing to fear. Your mom and dad and everybody's going to be there. And I was just trying to put his, you know, mind at ease. And I think his comment to me was something along the lines of, oh, so like nobody knows what happens on the other side, but you do.
You're like, thanks, Dad.
Thanks. So glad I got vulnerable here and shared that with you so that you could think I was crazy right before you died. That's awesome. Thanks.
And it shows they're almost on the spectrum of
Completely different ends of the
different aspects.
spectrum.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think the other important thing, I did get asked this once, and it just popped up as you were talking. You mentioned before there's no good, right or wrong way to die, which I 100% agree with. And a friend was telling me that, I think it was a cousin or a friend or someone, not directly in a thing, but died in a car accident. And she said the interesting thing was it was an out of a blue car accident, not the person's fault. But things that they did for the month beforehand, when they look back, it was like, did they know? Like, you know, they were in their late 20s, but they went and got a will. They were,
Wow.
yeah, and they did all these things. They actually rang friends that they hadn't spoken to for ages and just
It
said,
was
I love
probably
this.
just an intuition that you, yeah.
Yeah, and I think when I was mentioning with Matt earlier that you come and go, your soul knows that you're not going to be there for very long. And so somehow I believe his physical was being prepared for this death without actually being like told that you're going to die. And so you've got no diagnosis, you've got nothing, you just you know, going along your life. But for some reason, you're preparing for death in very subtle ways of making sure things are said and, you know, meeting up with the family and all those sort of stuff. So that was quite interesting for me to then look back and when with what happened to Matt was, you know, put in perspective of don't think that they have to have a diagnosis to get prepared to die because we don't. We're way, our soul is way more in tune than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also, I remember when my dad died. So my dad was sick for 10 years. And just before he died, he thought he was going to die, I think 5 years earlier, 4 years earlier. And he got very, very sick and everyone came to say goodbye. And somehow he just came back and pretty much they said it was a miracle. They don't know how he didn't die. All his organs were shutting down and everything. But he got up the next day and, you know, a week later, he left the hospital because he was okay. And he just got more better and better and still had his cancer. He had blood cancer, but he then got, this time it was very quick. He was like, went in with a cough, couldn't get over it, a chest infection sort of thing. And then within a month he'd passed away. But just before he died, he said to me, I don't feel like I'm going to die. Like last time I did. This time I'm like, so they're just going to take because he was breathing in oxygen. And he said, they're just saying my lungs are just going to shut down because he had pneumonia and I'm just going to die, right? Soon. And I'm like, yeah. And he had seen all the spirits come in, but he's going, I didn't think that this is what death felt like because last time is what death felt like. And last time I had seen him go up and extend a contract. So I knew that, I wasn't so worried that he was going to die. When he didn't die, I'm like, oh, he renewed his contract. This time I saw him renew a new contract, not this physical contract. He actually thumbprinted out and moved on to the next one was the symbol they gave me. So, but it was interesting that he was sort of calm. He's like, I wouldn't mind a bit more time. Like if I knew there's things I could have done, it's like, good Dad, you've had 10 years notice. Like, you know, you diagnosed at 70, you're now 80, like, you know, you were told. And his soul was very aware of it. And he went very calm and it was a beautiful death and he had family around him and it was all the way that it should be. But I think he expected more pain and more suffering at that time. And his soul was not giving him that. He had his life was not to be that, you know, horrible. He said goodbye to a lot of people. He was a very loving, caring man and spent a lot of time with people before they died. So he saw a lot of suffering before people died. And I think he expected that for himself and he was gifted not to get that. But which also gifted you with the feeling of not dying and then you're dead.
Right?
Yeah.
The thing that Spirit's stepping in with right now is they're saying that the soul, they're saying don't think that the soul doesn't know what it's doing because it does. The soul knows
Absolutely.
exactly what it's doing. The reason that the soul, it's confusing how they're saying it. The reason that the soul goes is to bring almost, they're showing me like glittery fibers for when they go back into the body, for the body to almost be infused with this understanding for a level of calmness. Now, I have to say though, I didn't necessarily see that with my father. And I wonder if it's because he wasn't a very spiritual person. No, they're saying everybody does it. It just wasn't obvious with
Yeah.
my father. The other thing that they brought to me when I was and it's kind of in line with this, and they're just bringing it back to me. Why are you bringing this up right now? I'll just go with it. They're talking about old souls and new souls, and they're saying that's not really true.
Oh,
There's
I was going to
old,
say, yeah, okay. I'm good
right?
with this. Yeah.
Because people have, I've heard mediums and different teachers talk about old souls and new souls. And what they're saying is that it's the consciousness of the body that is new and old. So there, it's like yeah, I know you're giving me a look like this doesn't make
No,
sense,
I
and it
need to,
doesn't to me. It
yeah.
doesn't to me yet either. Oh, this is really interesting. I I'm okay, I'll try to get into it and explain it. They're talking about basically they're showing me like the soul, and then they're showing me these fibers that kind of come off of it. And the newer in the physical, the newer bodies in the physical won't have as high of intuition as the older bodies in the physical. And I don't mean age. I mean, oh, I don't know what I mean. This is very difficult. It's like it's downloading right now.
Do you want me to give my understanding, or you're on the edge?
Yeah, I'm on the edge. It's basically what they're saying from a soul perspective is that all souls know exactly what they're doing.
Yep.
And there's speaking, there's not really a hierarchy when it comes to that level of souls. If that makes not a hierarchy, there's not new souls, old souls. It's just all part of this thing, and they're all sort of growing. But what they're talking about is okay, so it's like the body's ability to reach higher consciousness. There's a level of the body within the physical that has to be a certain way in order to reach a higher consciousness. Like it's like when you're putting two pieces of cloth together, they actually have to fit. So the soul is all knowing, but the fibers don't fit properly into the actual physical body in order for everybody to be enlightened. That's the best that I can do. You go ahead and tell me your understanding.
I think there's two things with that. I think there's a really important thing that needs to be said is that we're not all meant to be aware of our soul and our intuition. That's
Yes.
really important. So if someone isn't, let them be not, if that makes sense.
Yes, because that's what they're saying is that their physical isn't meant to.
Yes, and we need
Yes.
them. We need the scientific brain. We need, not that someone who's intuitive can't be scientific, because I think there's a level where the best scientists are the intuitive. That's a whole different podcast. But I think it's important to understand that we're all meant to have different roles. And what I'm hearing you say is part of that is the physical makeup that we've got. Our body's been
Yes.
designed to interact with our nervous system to a certain degree. It doesn't mean that you can't grow to it, but I think, and you can't change, you absolutely can. But I think there's a role for everyone from almost zero intuition, which no one has, but say 10% to 90% and everywhere in between. And the majority of us will sit somewhere between 30 and 50, but the extremes are really important to have for our world to exist as humans. The second part is on old souls and new souls. It's interesting. When my son was born, he used to stare at everyone, and everyone would say to him, like as a baby, they'd say, stop your baby looking at me. He's looking through me. He's like an old soul, right? And so, and my dog, when I got my dog, he's super calm, and he has puppy tendency, but he is just really calm. And people would say, oh, he's an old soul. And both of them were very commonly called old souls. Now, my understanding, and especially as I've got older and seen a lot more, my understanding as an old soul is that all souls are the same age, right? To start with. So there's no brand new or old souls because we're all
Thank you.
interconnected, right?
Yes.
So if we're talking age, but the soul, as I mentioned before, so there's a big cloud, and then in my friend's case, there is like what I call your eighth, and then you've got your seventh, and then you've got your little bit inside you, right? So you come out and you have this much of your soul you're communicating with all the time, which is the seventh, and then you go to your bigger part, which is interconnected to everyone anyway. But those, if we call that the water drop, your personal soul, your personal water drop, which is interconnected to everyone, but is on its own, can come and go in a human life more than another water drop, if that makes sense. But they're all feeding back to the same information. So everyone always has it. It's just easier for these souls. They come back in almost with knowledge of being human in a actual physical way and being aligned and all that sort of stuff. So when I see people's guides, for instance, one of my friends that I see all the time now, she asked me if I could see how many guides, and we've all got infinite guides in effect, but there was people around her and there was 7 and 4, and I could see the difference, and the difference between them was the 4, half of them, or the majority of them, had never been on the earth before, and the other ones had, or vice versa. Can't remember what it was. So I think that there is like those drops that don't go into a human body, but still have a really big purpose. And I think there's drops. So I think there's almost connected consciousness, but they're almost like little feeds going in, like almost little ants going into the mother nest. And so there's a little disconnect within that that's hard to explain. So I do believe in old souls and new souls, but I don't believe that the souls have a different age. I just think some parts of the soul are there to come and go. Like in my friend's case, I can see he is now helping other human souls, and he understands feeling and emotions and all that in that sort of way. So he's doing work, dying at a young age at 53. So he is working with people that need that help as a guide, as a soul guide. So when their soul, when they sleep and they go back into them, he's one of those energy feeds that are going into him that are helping them, if that makes sense. So it's quite complicated, but I do think the word old and new soul, to me,
Is
when
not
people say
accurate.
that, yeah, it's their meaning age. And to me,
It's
it's
not accurate.
actually, it's almost like being here before, being a human before, not being a human before. For me, that's, and I'm open to my understanding being changed, but I'm quite
So
comfortable
maybe,
with that's where it is.
yeah. So I agree with that, but there's still, like, it's not leaving my head. They want to make the point very clear. There's an aspect of the physical body
Yeah.
that makes it an old soul, that makes the soul shine more from that physical body, because that same soul, oh,
Yeah.
this is how they're doing it. The same soul could be in your friend Matt and shine beautiful spirituality, and the same soul could be in my father. That was pure logic. It's still the same soul, but because Matt had a body that was able to connect with it, like in the physical, to open the intuition, and my father did not have a physical body that was able to connect to it, to open to it. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? I think I finally kind of was able to wrap it up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
Okay.
and in saying that, when my friend was younger, he didn't. So he was very science-based. And
There
so
you
he
go.
evolved to that when the time was right. And I think that's important to know too. You can evolve and you can get more. We talked about that at the very start, didn't we? Tanya's like was so full already, but she's then expanded again to the next level. And so she's going to get more intuitive. You think, can I? And you can, and then you get more and you
And
go,
that's wild.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
And no, go ahead. Sorry, they're just stuck on this physical thing. They're speaking about how important it is to truly be in our bodies, and how
yes,
important it is to have that human experience, that we at times in spirituality can put too much weight on having an intuitive experience, and we need to and I say it a lot because I've always received this message, but they're being very clear about it right now, that it is so important to be in that physical body and to have that experience.
Yeah.
So I think this is all super fascinating. I find it fascinating, sort of the trips that you know your soul will take, but they just really wanted the message to be that the soul knows exactly what it's doing. It's coming in to kind of tell the body, for the physical body to embrace and understand that. So that's
and
my basics for the before.
Maybe what they're trying to say is that everyone is equally has an equal soul. Like, all our souls are attached. So don't think that someone is less intuitive, that they're just not in touch with it. They're just not aligned with it. And it comes back to what from day one we've been saying, like
the intuitive and the physical.
And that's why someone can have a near-death experience or something happened to them. And, you know, I've had a couple of friends that have had operations recently and have been under for quite a while, and they've come back with a whole different kind of perspective on, you know, they've gone science-based to, hey, I believe in spirit. So, you know, something can happen in your life to bring you back to alignment with your soul, to go, oh, that's an awareness I didn't have before. So, you know, I think we all need to trust that we're in the right place for it and stop chasing this need to know everything afterwards, you know, to be so intuitive.
I think you're speaking to me. I like to understand absolutely everything. I want to know exactly what's coming up for me in my life. I want to know exactly what's happening right now.
But even not, you know, I suppose that makes sense. But even just turn it, like, I want to see things, I want to hear things, I want to do this, I want to do that. There's so many people who spend so much time trying to chase that. And it's like, actually, just calm down. You actually are super intuitive. We all are. Just let your body integrate as it needs to, rather than try and chase it. It doesn't mean don't sit in meditation, doesn't mean do all those things. Definitely do that. And there's times where you need to stop and try and listen to your intuition. But I think what upsets me is we spend too much time chasing that and we forget to live. And, you know, we have beautiful human bodies and we're here for a short time. You know, I know my friend said that very much, like, he was really glad that he used his time in such a good way. And most of his time was in the physical. Most of his time was, you know, doing very tangible you know, things, and he helped a lot of people and did all these wonderful things. So concentrate on that rather than concentrate on trying to, you know.
Oh, you know what I forgot to share with my father is a couple days after he passed, all of a sudden he popped in and he goes, "You were right."
You went, that's all I needed. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little fist bump to yourself. Yeah, I know.
Right? Told you so. Actually, he's been back and chatted a little bit, but there's a part of me that's a little bit shut down to it, but we'll I'll share it with you sort of off the podcast. But with that said, do you have anything else to sort of add to the before?
No, I don't think so. I think we're
Okay.
yeah, we can look at next week going into
The during.
what happens when you die, you know. And we have
Yeah.
touched on this in the past, so this is kind of a recap in a way, but yeah.
But I feel like it's going to be a little bit deeper, because I don't know if we shared it on that podcast, but there was a lot that they weren't really letting us say.
Yeah.
And I don't, right? They didn't want us to get too deep into it. And interestingly, I don't feel that this time.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we'll sort of see how that goes. With that said, it was lovely to see you, Nettie. Thank you everybody for coming. We're so glad to be back. I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please put them down below. Please subscribe so that you can actually get a notification when we post our next podcast. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Same with you. And we're back. See you later.